Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was granted the power of Odin and ruled Asgard. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was screaming. It was a symphony of agony conducted by Tamura Shigaraki. The shriek of twisting metal from collapsing buildings, the roar of liberated Nomu, the desperate cries of heroes and civilians alike. It all blended into a single, overwhelming wave of sound that crashed against Izuku Midoriya's eardrums. His world had been reduced to this ruined cityscape, a graveyard of progress choked by dust and despair. And at its epicenter stood the man-turned-monster, a walking apocalypse with a sneering grin. Pain was an old, familiar friend to Izuku. He had shattered his bones more times than he could count, torn muscles, and pushed his body to the brink of self-destruction. But this was different. This was a deep, systemic agony, a cellular breakdown. Every nerve ending was a live wire. His left arm was a mangled ruin, the bones protruding through his tattered green suit like grotesque branches. His right leg buckled with every movement, the knee joint little more than a bag of shattered bone and frayed ligaments. He tasted copper and concrete. "Still standing, little hero?" Shigaraki's voice was a rasp, layered with the deeper, more resonant baritone of All for One. He stood amidst the destruction he had wrought, his body a canvas of horrific modifications, a forest of fleshy tendrils and bony protrusions writhing around him, his red eyes, burning with malevolent glee, fixed on Izuku. "Your friends are falling. Your precious society is crumbling to dust beneath my fingers. All you're doing is delaying the inevitable. Why not just lie down and decay with the rest of this broken world?" Izuku coughed, a wet, rattling sound that sent a fresh spray of crimson across his lips. He pushed himself up, his one good leg trembling violently. The green lightning of One for All flickered around him, a dying storm. 45% was all his ravaged body could handle, and even that was like running a current through frayed wires. It was a miracle he was even conscious. "Get up." The voice in his head was not his own. It was a chorus, the echoes of those who came before. The calm resolve of Nana Shimura, the gruff encouragement of Daigoro Banjo, the quiet strength of Yoichi Shigaraki. They were the embers of One for All, a legacy of defiance burning within him. He cannot win. "Not today. I can still move," Izuku gasped, forcing the words through a throat raw with exertion and dust. He activated Black Whip, the dark tendrils lashing out not as an attack, but as makeshift splints, wrapping around his shattered limbs to hold them together. It was a desperate, agonizing solution. The tendrils constricted, grinding the bone fragments together with every slight movement, sending white-hot jolts of pain through his system. Shigaraki laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Resourceful. Just like your master. But all might is gone, and you are just a pale imitation. A child playing with a power you can't possibly comprehend." He lunged. The ground erupted as he moved, the very air seeming to warp around his sheer destructive intent. Izuku's mind, honed by danger sense and the analytical fury of 1,000 battles, screamed at him. He used Fa Gene, storing the kinetic energy from his own pain trembling into his ruined legs. He didn't have time for a proper wind-up. "Float." He pushed off the ground, Nana Shimura's quirk giving him just enough lift to evade the wave of decay that turned the street below into a river of gray sludge. In midair he spun, the vestiges screaming in unison, "Detroit!" Smash! He put everything he had left into his right arm, the one that wasn't actively sticking out of his skin. The muscles screamed in protest. He felt something tear deep in his shoulder. The resulting shockwave was immense, a concussive blast that ripped through the air and slammed into Shigaraki. It peeled back the asphalt for 50 meters and sent cars tumbling like children's toys. For a moment, there was silence. Izuku landed hard, his body screaming as the impact traveled up his spine. He saw Shigaraki, braced against the gale, a deep trench carved into the ground behind him. The blow had landed. It had to be enough, but it wasn't. Shigaraki straightened up, a network of rivet stabs retracting into his back. His regeneration quirk was working overtime, knitting together the superficial damage Izuku's attack had caused. The sneer was back on his face. "Is that it?" All for One's voice was dominant now, full of mocking disappointment. Is that the pinnacle of one for all? How pathetic. You can't even scratch me, ninth. You are a failure. Your legacy ends here, in this filth, forgotten. The words were a physical blow, colder and sharper than any punch. Despair, a chilling, insidious tendril, began to creep into Izuku's heart. He looked around. He saw Endeavor locked in a desperate struggle with a Heian Nomu, his flames sputtering. He saw Bakugo, being tended to by Best Jeanist, his face a mask of fury and pain. He saw Uraraka, her face pale with exhaustion, trying to evacuate a group of trapped civilians. They were all fighting. They were all at their limits, and he was failing them. No, he would not fail. A hero's job was to smile in the face of certain death. To be a pillar of hope when all hope was lost. All Might had taught him that. He channeled the last dregs of his strength, the flickering embers of One for All. If he went to 100% now, his body would detonate. He knew that. It would be a final, glorious, self-destructive act. He would take Shigaraki with him. It was the only way. I won't let you hurt anyone else! Izuku roared, the sound more animal than human. Green lightning exploded from his body, no longer a controlled aura but a chaotic, violent tempest. The vestiges within him went silent, their combined will flowing into his. This was it. The final act. He prepared to launch himself forward, a human missile aimed at the heart of destruction. His life for theirs. It was a worthy trade. And then, the world stopped screaming. The sound didn't just fade, it was stolen. The roar of battle, the crackle of fire, the howling wind, all of it vanished, replaced by a profound, unnatural silence. The air grew cold and thin, shimmering as if viewed through intense heat. The color began to drain from the sky, the angry red and orange of the burning city fading to a monochromatic gray. Izuku froze, his final charge aborted. Shigaraki, too, paused, his head cocked in confusion. Every hero, every villain on the battlefield looked up. Directly above the epicenter of their battle, the fabric of reality was tearing. It didn't look like Kurojire's warp gates, those inky, nebulous portals. This was a clean, geometric fissure, a crack in the very sky. It bled light, not sunlight, but a light that was ancient, golden, and impossibly pure. It was the light of a forge that birthed stars, the light of a king's hall at the dawn of time. From the tear, a sound emerged, not loud, but resonant enough to vibrate in their bones, the sound of a great, cosmic horn being blown in a distant realm. Then, something fell through. It wasn't a man, not in any conventional sense. It was a figure of immense, archaic majesty, now broken and dying. He was clad in ornate golden armor, so intricately carved it looked more like a piece of sculpture than a tool of war. But the armor was shattered, cracked across the chest plate, one pauldron torn clean away. He had a long, white beard, stained with a golden, ichor-like blood that dripped into the air and sizzled into motes of light before they could hit the ground. A winged helmet was askew on his head, and beneath it, a single eye, a deep, endless blue that held the wisdom of 1,000 millennia, was wide with pain and exhaustion. In his hand, he clutched a magnificent golden spear, Gungnir, that hummed with a power that made the air thrum. The figure fell, not like a man, but like a dying star plummeting from its celestial perch. He was a king in ruin, an embodiment of fading glory. What is that? Uraraka whispered from a block away, her voice trembling with awe and terror. Bakugo, struggling to his feet, could only stare, his usual explosive anger replaced by stunned disbelief. The hell, but where others saw a mystery, all for one saw only one thing, power. An incredible, unprecedented source of power, raw and untamed, falling right into his lap. Shigaraki's body contorted, the master's will surging to the forefront. Mine! He hissed, his voice a chorus of greed. Whatever that power is, it will be mine! Ignoring Izuku completely, Shigaraki launched himself towards the fallen king, his hands outstretched, fingers crooked into claws, ready to touch, to steal, to decay. Izuku's hero instinct, the core of his very being, screamed. That being, whoever or whatever he was injured. He was a target. He had to be protected. With a cry of sheer, self-destructive will, Izuku pushed off, his black whip tendrils propelling him into the air, placing his broken body directly between Shigaraki and the falling stranger. It was a suicidal, insane act of pure, unthinking heroism. The old king's name was Odin. He was the Allfather of Asgard, the protector of the 9 realms, the keeper of wisdom. And he was dying. His final battle, against a being of pure entropy that sought to devour Yggdrasil itself, had cost him everything. His body was broken, the Odin force that sustained him was hemorrhaging into the void, and his final, desperate act, a blind leap through a fraying branch of the world tree, had deposited him here, in this strange, chaotic world he knew as Midgard. His time was measured in heartbeats. But the throne of Asgard could not be left empty. The Odin force could not be allowed to dissipate into nothingness. It was a power meant to protect, to rule, to preserve the balance of the cosmos. It needed a vessel. A successor. His one remaining eye, clouded with the haze of his impending death, fell upon the scene below. He saw the monster of pure destruction, a being reeking of stolen life and bottomless avarice. He saw its hunger, a void that sought to consume all power, and then he saw the boy. The boy was a ruin. A child shattered in the crucible of battle. His life force was a flickering candle in a hurricane. But Odin saw more than the broken body. With the last dregs of his cosmic sight, he saw the boy's soul, and it was on fire. He saw the lineage burning within him, a torch passed down through 8 generations, each bearer adding their own spark to the growing flame. He saw a legacy of sacrifice, of hope passed from one dying hand to the next. He saw the ghosts of heroes standing behind the boy, a silent, spectral army lending him their strength. He saw the boy's heart, a brilliant, blinding sun of compassion and unwavering resolve. He saw the boy's singular, all-consuming desire, I want to save everyone. In that moment, Odin Borson, who had seen the birth of galaxies and the death of gods, saw something he had not seen in eons. He saw a spirit so pure, so utterly selfless, that it mirrored the noblest ideals of Asgard itself. He saw a will stronger than any Yu metal, a heart more worthy than any king's. He had no time to search for Thor. No time to consider the complexities of lineage or tradition. The monster was closing in. The power had to be passed. As Shigaraki's decaying touch was mere inches from the old king's form, Odin raised his spear. He did not point it at the villain. He pointed it at the broken green-haired boy who had so foolishly, so heroically, placed himself in harm's way. Their eyes met. Izuku's, wide with pain and confusion. Odin's, filled with the weight of an eon's worth of judgment. A single word left the Allfather's lips. It was not a shout that shook the heavens, but a quiet, final pronouncement, a whisper that carried the absolute authority of a dying god. Worthy, Gungnir flared. It was not a light. It was the concept of light. A blinding, solid wave of pure golden energy erupted from the spear, not as an attack, but as an anointing. It struck Izuku Midoriya square in the chest. For Izuku, the world dissolved, the pain vanished. Not faded, but ceased to exist, as if it had been a dream. The symphony of battle was replaced by the sound of 1,000,000,000,000 stars being born and dying in a single, harmonious chord. His consciousness was ripped from his body and flung across the cosmos. He saw it all. He saw the great world tree, Yggdrasil, its roots sunk deep in the fabric of reality, its branches holding aloft 9 vibrant realms of impossible beauty and terror. He saw the golden city of Asgard, its spires piercing the celestial sky. He saw the frozen wastes of Jotunheim, the fiery pits of Muspelheim, the dark elf forests of Svartalfheim. Memories, not his own, flooded his mind. He felt the weight of a crown settling on his brow. He felt the cool wood of Gungnir in his hand as he rode the 8-legged steed Sleipnir into a battle against frost giants. He tasted 1,000-year-old mead in a great hall filled with the laughter of warriors. He felt the sting of sacrificing an eye at the well of Mimir for ultimate wisdom. He felt the sorrow of banishing a son, the pride of seeing him return a hero, the agony of losing a wife. 1,000,000,000 years of life, of rule, of love and loss and war, were slammed into the mind of a 16-year-old boy. The sheer, crushing weight of the Odin force, the primal, cosmic power that bound Asgard together, poured into him, not as a quirk, but as a fundamental rewriting of his existence. It searched for a foundation and found the embers of one for all. The two powers met, one a stockpiling quirk of mortal heroes, the other an infinite well of divine cosmic energy. They did not merge, but they recognized each other. The legacy of sacrifice in one for all formed a vessel, a container for the raging, infinite ocean of the Odin force. His very DNA was unwritten and rewritten in gold. His broken bones did not just heal, they were reforged, imbued with the density of a dwarf star. His torn muscles were rewoven with threads of cosmic stamina. His blood began to sing with celestial energy. On the battlefield, the heroes and villains were thrown back by the sheer force of the golden light. It was an absolute, unstoppable wave of pure power. Shigaraki was blasted backwards, his body sizzling as the divine energy momentarily overwhelmed his regeneration, screaming in a mixture of fury and agony. The light pulsed once, twice, and then receded, coalescing back into the boy at its center. And then, there was silence. Izuku Midoriya hovered in the air where Odin had been. The old king was gone, his body having dissolved into the light, his final act complete. All that remained was the boy, but it was not the same boy. His hero costume was gone, disintegrated or transfigured. In its place was armor. It was not the ornate, heavy plate of Odin, but something sleek, modern, and uniquely his. It was forged of a dark, glistening metal that seemed to drink the light, accented with plates of burnished gold on his chest, forearms, and shoulders. Underneath the armor was a dark green tunic, the color of his old costume, a familiar anchor in the sea of change. His signature red sneakers were gone, replaced by knee-high golden boots. His body was whole. The scars that crisscrossed his arms were still there, faint silver lines against his skin, but the fresh wounds, the broken bones, the torn flesh, all of it was gone. He looked stronger, taller, his frame filled out with a dense, powerful new musculature. In his right hand, he held the golden spear, Gungnir. It hummed in his grip, feeling as natural and familiar as if he had been born holding it. In his left hand, which just moments ago had been a mangled mess, he flexed his fingers, feeling the impossible, boundless strength coursing through him. His mind was a maelstrom of confusion. The memories of Odin were a roaring tempest in the back of his skull, a library of 1 billion books all thrown open at once. He didn't understand any of it, but he could feel it. He could feel the 9 realms. He could feel the Bifrost Bridge. He could feel the throne, Hlidskjaf, waiting for its master in a distant golden hall. And he could feel the rage and hatred of the creature below. Shigaraki staggered to his feet, his skin smoking. The all-for-one persona was in full control, its ancient intellect reeling from what it had just witnessed. "What have you done?" The voice of all-for-one boomed from Shigaraki's mouth. "What is this power? It's not a quirk. Give it to me!" He lunged again, more desperate this time, a swarm of black tendrils erupting from his back, a mockery of Izuku's own black whip. Izuku didn't think. He didn't have time to process the 1 billion years of memories, the cosmic weight that had settled on his soul. He had no idea how to use this new power. He only knew one thing, the single, driving instinct that had defined his entire life: protect. He raised Gungnir. He didn't aim. He didn't channel. He simply willed it. A beam of pure, concentrated energy, the color of a newborn star, erupted from the spear's tip. It was not wild and concussive like a smash. It was focused, precise, and utterly overwhelming. It moved with the speed of light, silent and absolute. The beam struck the ground in front of the charging Shigaraki. It did not create an explosion. It simply, unmade. The asphalt, the concrete, the rebar, it all vanished in a silent flash of gold, leaving behind a perfectly smooth, 50-foot-wide crater that glowed with residual heat. The force of the energy's release created a shockwave that slammed into Shigaraki, not as a physical impact, but as a wave of pure, ordering cosmic force. It was the antithesis of his decay. He was thrown back 100 meters, tumbling through the air like a ragdoll, his body convulsing as the divine energy warred with the chaotic quirks within him. He landed in a heap, and for the first time, the monster looked afraid. All for one, a being who coveted all power, had just encountered a power that it could not comprehend, could not steal, and could not fight. "Retreat!" The ancient villain's voice commanded, forcing Shigaraki's broken body to its feet. With the help of a nearby Nomu, he vanished into the smoke and chaos, gone. The battlefield fell into a stunned, breathless silence. The remaining villains, seeing their leader flee in terror, began to falter and scatter. The heroes could only stare up at the figure floating in the sky. Izuku lowered the spear, his arm trembling not from weakness, but from the sheer, terrifying feedback of the power he had just unleashed. His head was swimming. What just happened? Who was that man? What is this feeling? He looked down at his hands, at the golden spear, at the impossible armor. This wasn't him. Deku? He heard Uraraka's voice, small and fragile in the sudden quiet. He turned his head, and his eyes, now shining with a faint golden light, met those of his friends. He saw Bakugo, his mouth agape, a million furious questions dying on his lips. He saw Todoroki, his usual stoicism shattered by sheer, unadulterated shock. He saw All Might in the distance, his skeletal form frozen, staring at the boy who had inherited a power far beyond One for All. He saw their fear, their confusion. He opened his mouth to speak, to reassure them, to ask them what was happening. But before he could utter a single word, the sky tore open again. This time, it was a focused, brilliant column of rainbow-colored light that slammed down around him. It wasn't violent, but it was absolute. It was the Bifrost, the bridge between worlds, summoned by the last command of its dead king, now coming to collect his successor. No! Izuku cried out, his own voice sounding foreign and powerful to his ears. He reached out a hand towards his friends, a desperate plea for an anchor in this insane new reality. Wait! Bakugo finally snapped out of his trance. Deku! He roared, firing off an explosion to propel himself forward, his hand outstretched. But it was too late. The column of rainbow light intensified, and with a sound like 1,000 shattering crystals, Izuku Midoriya was pulled upwards, yanked out of his world with irresistible force. The last thing he saw was the horrified face of his childhood friend, his hand just inches from his own. The last thing he heard was his own name being screamed by the people he had sworn to protect. Then, his consciousness gave out. The strain of the battle, the shock of the transformation, the sheer psychic trauma of inheriting a god's lifetime in a single second, it all came crashing down. As he shot through the cosmic tunnel between realms, Izuku Midoriya, the ninth user of One for All, the boy who just wanted to be a hero, fell unconscious. On the ruined streets of Jaka's city, the light vanished. The tear in the sky sealed itself, leaving behind nothing but an eerie silence and the lingering smell of ozone and something ancient, something golden. The villains were in retreat. The battle was, for all intents and purposes, over. But no one was cheering. The heroes stood amidst the rubble, staring at the empty sky where their greatest hope had just been. He had saved them. He had driven off the monster they could not defeat, and then he was gone. Stolen by a falling star and a pillar of rainbow light, Izuku Midoriya was gone. And in his place, a king had been born. A king who was now hurtling through the cosmos, towards a golden throne he did not want, and a crown whose crushing weight he could not yet begin to comprehend. The first thing Izuku Midoriya perceived was peace. It was a sensation so profound and so alien that it was more disorienting than the most violent pain. There was no screaming, no roar of fire, no grating sound of decaying concrete. The air in his lungs was clean, carrying a faint, sweet scent like ozone after a summer storm and blooming flowers he couldn't name. He was lying on something impossibly soft, a cool, silken fabric against his skin. His body felt whole. More than whole. It felt new. He cautiously opened his eyes. The light was golden, soft, and seemed to emanate not from a single source, but from the very walls themselves. He was in a large, circular chamber with a domed ceiling that swirled with intricate, geometric patterns resembling constellations he had never seen. The walls were a smooth, cream-colored material that felt more like polished stone than any kind of plaster or metal. Carved into them were luminous golden runes that pulsed with a gentle, rhythmic light, like a sleeping heart. Panic, a cold and familiar jolt, shot through him. He sat up in a single, fluid motion, his body responding with an ease and power that stunned him. He looked down at himself. He was dressed in a simple, loose-fitting tunic of deep green cloth. He raised his hands. The scars were there, a road map of his painful journey with One for All, faint silver lines etched into his skin. But the memory of shattered bones, of flesh torn open to the world, was just that, a memory. His left arm, which had been a mangled ruin of bone and sinew, was now perfect. He flexed his fingers, feeling the effortless strength in every tendon. This wasn't just healed. This was remade. The hum was the next thing he noticed. It wasn't a sound he heard with his ears, but a vibration deep in his bones, a resonant thrum of immense, ancient power that was now a part of him. It was the Odin force, a silent ocean of energy contained within the vessel of his soul. He could feel One for All, too, a familiar, crackling fire nested within that ocean, not extinguished, but dwarfed, an ember floating on a sun. "Ah, you are awake!" The voice was female, calm and melodic, with an accent that was ancient and regal. Izuku's head snapped towards the sound. A woman stood by a table laden with crystalline vials and strange, glowing instruments. She was tall and slender, with long, silver hair braided with golden thread. She wore elegant, flowing robes of white and gold, and her eyes, the color of a winter sky, held a placid, analytical intelligence. Where am I?" Izuku's voice was hoarse, but it came out stronger than he expected. "Fuller, you are in the halls of healing, within the royal citadel of Asgard," the woman replied, her expression unreadable. She glided over to his bedside, holding a glowing crystal that pulsed in time with the runes on the walls. "I am heir, physician to the crown, and you, little Midgardian, are the single greatest medical anomaly I have encountered in 3,000 years of practice." Asgard. The name echoed in his mind, pulled from the torrent of memories that were not his own. A golden city. A kingdom of gods. It was impossible. It had to be a dream, a hallucination brought on by his injuries. "I don't understand," he stammered, his mind reeling. "The battle. Shigaraki, the conflict on your world is far from here," Air said, waving the crystal over his chest. It glowed brighter, and she let out a soft, fascinated hum. "Fascinating. Your cellular structure is unlike anything I have ever documented. It is as if every cell in your body has become a miniature, self-sustaining star, burning with a clean, potent energy. The regeneration was instantaneous. There was no mending of bone or weaving of tissue. Your physical form simply reset itself to its optimal state." She leaned closer, her analytical gaze intense. "And that is not even the most peculiar aspect. I detect two distinct energy signatures within you. One is finite though impressively powerful. It feels like a reservoir, a legacy passed down and stockpiled. But the other," her voice dropped to a whisper of awe. "The other is boundless. It is the lifeblood of the 9 realms, the power of creation itself. The All-Force. How it coexists within a mortal shell alongside another power source is a paradox that will require centuries of study." Izuku shook his head, trying to clear the fog. Mortal shell. 9 realms. All-Force. It was the language of myth, yet she spoke it as simple fact. The memories of Odin, the dying king, flashed in his mind. Worthy. The golden light. The spear in his hand. The old man. Izuku began, his voice trembling. "The one who fell from the sky. What did he do to me?" Air's calm demeanor finally broke, her expression softening with a flicker of sorrow. "He did what he believed he must. He saved his kingdom, and perhaps all the realms, in his final moments. He gave you his greatest gift, and his heaviest burden." Before Izuku could ask another question, the grand, golden doors to the chamber swung open with a silent, majestic grace. 3 figures stood silhouetted against the brilliant light of the hallway beyond. As they stepped inside, the air in the room seemed to grow heavy, thick with grief, power, and intrigue. The first was a sentinel, a guardian carved from living stone and duty. He was impossibly tall, clad in gleaming golden armor so polished it acted as a mirror. His helmet covered his entire head, and from its depths, 2 eyes glowed with the light of suns. This was Heimdall, the Watcher of Worlds. Izuku knew his name with the same instinctual certainty that he knew his own, another piece of Odin's knowledge bubbling to the surface. Heimdall's gaze seemed to pass right through Izuku, seeing not just the boy, but the dual powers raging within him, the fear in his heart, and the latent destiny that had been thrust upon him. The second figure was a mountain of muscle and sorrow. Thor, the god of thunder. He was even larger than he appeared in the legends that flickered through Odin's memories. His blonde hair was long and braided, his beard thick. He wore armor of silver and black, with a magnificent red cape that fell to the floor. At his hip hung the short-handled war hammer, Mjolnir, which seemed to pull the light from the room towards it, humming with a barely contained storm. But it was his eyes that held Izuku's attention. They were a piercing blue, like his father's, but they were red-rimmed with unshed tears, lost in a sea of grief and confusion. He looked at Izuku not with anger, but with a profound, weary bewilderment. He was a son who had just lost his father, and was now faced with the impossible stranger who had taken his place. The third was a shadow-given form. He was leaner than Thor, with a pale complexion and slicked-back raven hair. He moved with a liquid grace, a predator in a prince's clothing. He wore fine leathers of green and black, accented with gold. A smirk played on his lips, but it never reached his sharp, intelligent green eyes. Those eyes danced with a mixture of morbid curiosity and cunning calculation. This was Loki, the god of mischief, the master of silver tongues and hidden daggers. Where Thor saw a confusing tragedy, Loki saw a fascinating, exploitable opportunity. Heimdall stepped forward, his voice the tolling of a great bell, each word resonating with absolute authority. Izuku Midoriya of Midgard. It was jarring to hear his name spoken by such a being. By the final decree of Odin Borson, the All-Father, who passed from this life and into the eternal halls of Valhalla, his power, his station, and his sacred duty have been passed to you. Heimdall's golden eyes fixed on him. The Odin force has accepted you. The throne awaits you. All hail the new All-Father, King of Asgard. The words slammed into Izuku with the force of a physical blow. King. King of Asgard. The dream, the hallucination, was real. The weight of that single word was heavier than any building he had ever lifted, more crushing than any punch he had ever taken. No, Izuku whispered, the denial immediate and visceral. No, that's impossible. It's a mistake. I'm nobody. I'm a hero student from Japan. I'm not a king. Loki let out a soft, musical chuckle. A mistake? Oh, I do hope so. Things are always so much more interesting when they begin with a mistake. He began to circle the bed, his movements fluid and serpentine, his eyes scanning Izuku from head to toe. Tell me, mortal child, what did my father see in you? A desperate, broken creature with a suicidal sense of nobility? Father's sense of humor was always unique. Loki's silence. Thor's voice was a low growl, like the rumble of distant thunder. He hadn't moved, but his presence filled the room. His gaze was still locked on Izuku. My father did not make mistakes in matters of the throne. He was the wisest of us all. He finally took a step forward, his heavy boots thudding against the glowing floor. He stopped at the foot of the bed, looking down at Izuku. The sheer scale of him was intimidating. I do not pretend to understand his choice. I look at you, and I see a boy. A brave boy, perhaps, but not a king. Not my father. The grief in his voice was palpable. Izuku's heart, the hero's heart that felt empathy for everyone, ached for the grieving son before him. But his own panic was a tidal wave, drowning out everything else. I'm sorry for your loss, Izuku said, the words feeling small and inadequate. I truly am. But this isn't right. My world is in danger. My friends, they're still fighting. I have to go back. You have to send me back. Heimdall remained impassive. The will of the All-Father is absolute. Your place is here now. The 9 realms are without a ruler. Such a vacuum invites chaos. Your duty has changed. My duty is to them. Izuku insisted, his voice rising with desperation. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, standing for the first time. The power that surged through him was staggering. He felt as though he could punch a hole through the planet, yet he was a prisoner in this golden hall. Please, just listen. There's a villain named All for One. He'll destroy everything. I have a power, one for all, that was meant to stop him. That is my purpose, my destiny. Not this. Thor's expression hardened, a flicker of disappointment crossing his features. Destiny is not a thing one chooses. It is a burden one bears. He gestured to the door. Come, you cannot understand what has happened to you while hiding in a healer's ward. You must see it. You must feel the weight of the crown you so casually wished to cast aside. There was no choice. Arguing was useless. Izuku, feeling like a leaf caught in a divine whirlwind, followed them out of the healing chamber. The scale of Asgard was breathtaking. It was a city built by gods with an architect's dream and a poet's soul. Towers of gold and silver pierced the sky, so tall their peaks were lost in the ethereal clouds of the stardusted cosmos. Waterfalls cascaded from floating islands, their spray catching the light and creating perpetual rainbows. Flying skiffs, elegant vessels shaped like swans and dragons, navigated the air with silent grace. The air was alive with the sound of distant horns, the clang of hammers from unseen forges, and the murmur of a populace speaking a language he shouldn't know, but somehow understood perfectly. Warriors in polished armor and horned helmets stopped and stared as he passed, their expressions a mixture of awe, suspicion, and confusion. They saw the son of Odin, the god of thunder. They saw the son of Odin, the prince of lies. They saw the keeper of the Bifrost, and walking among them, looking small and utterly out of place despite the power radiating from him, was a green-haired boy from Earth. Whispers followed them like a wake behind a ship. Is that him, the Midgardian, Odin's choice? He looks like a child. They say he faced a world eater. The whispers were a physical pressure, adding to the crushing weight in his chest. Every stare felt like a judgment. He was an imposter, a fraud. He pulled his green tunic tighter around himself, a useless gesture of self-preservation. Loki walked beside him, a low, conspiratorial murmur in his ear. Pay them no mind. They are simple creatures. They feared my father, and they will fear you. Power is the only language Asgard truly respects. Show them a little of this. All force, and they will grovel at your feet. Or you could simply give the throne to a more experienced candidate. Someone with a blood right. I could be persuaded to send you home for such a favor. Izuku ignored him, his eyes fixed on the massive golden doors at the end of the grand promenade. This was the entrance to the throne room. He could feel it. The very stones hummed with a concentrated power that called to the Odin force inside him. The doors, each easily 100 feet high and carved with the history of the 9 realms, swung open at their approach. The throne room was a cavern of gold and starlight. The ceiling was an open starfield, a living tapestry of swirling nebulas and distant galaxies. Massive pillars, each carved into the likeness of a great Asgardian king of the past, held the starfield aloft. The hall was empty save for the 4 of them, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous silence. And at the far end, upon a raised dais, was the throne, Hlidskjaf. It was not merely a chair. It was a living monument, seemingly carved from a single, massive piece of gold that looked like the petrified branch of an immense tree. Runes of power, older than any Izuku had seen so far, were etched into its surface, glowing with a fierce, internal light. The throne radiated an aura of absolute authority and cosmic awareness. It was the center of Asgard, the heart of the 9 realms, and it was waiting. This is Hlidskjaf, Thor said, his voice softer now, filled with reverence. The high seat of Odin. From this throne, he watched over all of creation. He saw a child's tear in Alfheim, and a king's betrayal in Vanaheim. He saw every star being born, every life taking its first breath. This is the burden of the crown, little king, the duty to see all, and to judge. Izuku felt a magnetic pull towards it. The Odin force within him yearned for its focal point, its amplifier. His feet moved of their own accord, carrying him up the shallow golden steps of the dais. He felt Heimdall's watchful gaze, Loki's amused smirk, and Thor's heavy, grief-stricken stare. He reached the throne. It was huge, built for a god, not a boy. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the golden armrest. What are you waiting for? Loki's voice echoed in the silence. The universe holds its breath. Take your seat, your majesty. Taking a shaky breath, Izuku turned and sat. The moment his body touched the throne, the universe screamed. Hlidskjaf connected with the Odin force within him, and the floodgates of cosmic perception were thrown wide open. His mind, his senses, his very soul were ripped from the throne room and flung across the infinite expanse of the 9 realms simultaneously. He was no longer in Asgard. He was everywhere. He felt the searing heat of Muspelheim on his skin, the molten rock flowing like rivers around the feet of Surtur's legions. He heard the guttural war chants of the fire giants, hungry for a new Ragnarok. He felt the biting, impossible cold of Jotunheim in his bones, the howling winds carving canyons through glaciers the size of continents. He saw the last of the frost giants, hidden in their icy fortresses, whispering of a new age without Odin's watchful eye. He smelled the rich, damp earth of Vanaheim, heard the songs of the Vanir gods, felt the slow, powerful pulse of life magic flowing through every plant and creature. He heard the clang of 1,000 hammers in the subterranean forges of Nidavellir, as the dwarves shaped Uru metal in the heart of a dying star, their greedy eyes gleaming in the firelight. He saw the elegant, shimmering cities of the light elves in Alfheim, their laughter like wind chimes, and felt the creeping dread from the sunless forests of Svartalfheim, where the dark elves sharpened their blades in the shadows. He felt the spectral winds of Helheim on his neck, heard the mournful whispers of the dishonored dead, a kingdom of grey mist and unending sorrow, and he felt Midgard. Earth. It was a chaotic, brilliant cacophony of sensation. He felt the prayers of 7 billion souls, a constant, rushing whisper in his mind. He saw the ongoing battles, the struggles of his fellow heroes against the remnants of the Paranormal Liberation Front. He saw Endeavor, roaring in defiance. He saw Hawks, his wings tattered, still fighting. He saw his friends, his classmates, gathered around a worried All Might, their faces etched with fear and confusion for their missing friend. He felt Uraraka's desperate hope, Bakugo's explosive, guilt-ridden fury, Todoroki's quiet, steadfast concern. He felt their pain as if it were his own. He saw it all. Every war. Every birth. Every betrayal. Every act of kindness. 1 trillion lives, 1 billion conflicts, 1 million prayers, all demanding his attention, his judgment, his protection. It was a weight that could shatter galaxies, and it was all resting on his shoulders. A border dispute in Alfheim needs a mediator. A plague is sweeping through a mortal village in the eastern sector. The dwarves are threatening to cease trade over a mining treaty. A Kree warship is testing the borders of Asgardian space. All for One is still out there. My friends are still in danger. All Might is alone. My responsibility. My fault. My burden. The sensory overload was too much. It was 1,000 lifetimes of information crammed into a single second. It was the psychic pressure of a collapsing star. A raw, agonized scream was torn from his lungs. He threw himself from the throne, scrambling backwards as if it were on fire, tumbling down the steps of the dais and collapsing onto the cold, golden floor. He curled into a ball, his hands clasped over his head, his body trembling uncontrollably. He was hyperventilating, his mind a fractured mess of cosmic images and the desperate, terrified thoughts of a 16-year-old boy completely out of his depth. Make it stop! He gasped, tears streaming down his face, the first he'd shed since this nightmare began. Please make it stop! He pushed himself to his feet, his legs shaking. He faced the 3 beings watching him, his expression one of wild, cornered panic. The mask of a king, if he ever had one, was gone. All that was left was Deku, the scared, crying kid from Muzurifu. This is a mistake! He shouted, his voice cracking, echoing through the vast, silent throne room. Don't you see? I can't do this! I'm not a king! I'm not a god! I'm a student! I'm from Earth! I have to go back! My friends are in danger! I'm not supposed to be here! He looked at Thor, his eyes pleading. Please! You have to understand. My home needs me. This is too much for anyone. I can't. I won't do it. Loki watched the breakdown with the detached fascination of a scholar observing a rare, exotic insect. A slow, genuine smile finally graced his lips. This was going to be even more entertaining than he had imagined. But Thor did not move. The look of pained confusion on his face had vanished, replaced by a cold, hard disappointment that was more intimidating than any rage. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, his voice dangerously low. My father! Thor said, each word a chip of ice. The All-Father, King of Asgard, protector of the 9 realms, saw the end of his eon-long life approaching. In his final moments, in his last act of will, he searched the cosmos for a soul worthy of his power, his throne, his very life. He chose you. He was standing over Izuku now, a towering figure of divine judgment. And you! Thor's voice fell to a near whisper, laced with a quiet fury that was more terrifying than any shout. Throw his final gift back in his face and call it a mistake. The weight of Thor's disappointment was the final straw. Izuku's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a hollow, chilling despair. He was trapped. He was alone, a universe away from everyone he had ever known, a prisoner in a golden cage, crowned a king of a kingdom he didn't want, by a dead god he had never met. And the heroes of this strange, terrifying world looked at him not with hope, but with contempt. The days that followed were a gilded torment. Izuku was given chambers befitting a king, a suite of rooms carved into the highest spire of the royal citadel. The balcony overlooked the whole of Asgard, a breathtaking panorama of impossible architecture and celestial beauty that should have inspired awe, but only served to deepen his profound sense of isolation. He was a castaway on an island of gold, a universe away from the home he yearned for. Sleep offered no respite. When he closed his eyes, the memories of Odin rushed in, not as a flood, but as a relentless, chaotic tide. He jolted awake with the phantom pain of a sacrificed eye, the taste of 1,000-year-old mead on his tongue, or the guttural roar of a frost giant echoing in his ears. The Odin force was a constant companion, a low-level hum in the marrow of his bones, a background whisper of 1,000,000,000,000 distant lives. It was like trying to sleep with every television on every planet in the universe turned on at once. He learned to exist in a state of perpetual, weary alertness, his mind never truly quiet. He was a king without a kingdom, a ruler who refused to rule. He avoided the throne room like a plague, the memory of that crushing, all-encompassing perception still raw and terrifying. He spent his time pacing the golden halls, an uneasy ghost in a land of gods, while Thor grieved, Loki watched with predatory amusement, and the court of Asgard whispered. After a week of this self-imposed confinement, a fragile resolve began to form amidst the chaos of his mind. He was a hero. And what did a hero do when faced with an insurmountable problem? They didn't run. They didn't hide. They analyzed it, broke it down, and trained until they could overcome it. This power, this Odin force, was the ultimate problem. It was a quirk of infinite, terrifying scale, and if he ever wanted to regain a semblance of control over his own life, let alone find a way home, he had to understand it. He sought out the royal training grounds, a vast, open-air coliseum with a floor of polished obsidian that seemed to absorb the light of the cosmos above. The air here was different, charged with the lingering energy of eons of combat. He could feel the echoes of ancient battles, of Thor's lightning, of Sif's swordplay, of Odin's own immense power. He stood in the center of the arena, alone. He closed his eyes, trying to focus. He knew One for All. He knew its feeling, the crackle of green energy, the coiled spring of power waiting to be released. He reached for that feeling now, that familiar ember inside the raging inferno of the Odin force. He found it, small but steady. Okay, Midoriya. Let's start with what you know. A smash. But how did one smash with the power that held galaxies together? He tried to channel the Odin force into his fist the same way he channeled One for All. It was like trying to funnel an ocean through a garden hose. The power didn't want to be contained. It wasn't a stockpile of kinetic energy. It was the very fabric of existence, and it resisted being treated like a simple tool. Focus, he muttered to himself, his teeth gritted. He remembered All Might's lessons. Clench your buttocks and scream it from the heart. It seemed ridiculous now. A mortal lesson in a divine world, but it was all he had. He drew his right arm back, the golden plates of his new armor shifting silently. He poured every ounce of his concentration into his fist, trying to gather the cosmic energy there. The air around his hand began to shimmer and warp. Golden light, far more intense than One for All's green lightning, began to arc between his fingers. It wasn't crackling, it was singing, a low, harmonic chorus of pure power. Okay, I think I've got it, he breathed. He pictured a target dummy at the far end of the arena. He pictured the impact. He took a deep, steadying breath. Odin! Smash! He roared the words, punching the air with everything he had. The result was not what he expected. There was no concussive boom, no shockwave of displaced air. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened at all. Then, the space where his fist had been shattered, a silent, black fissure, a spider web of cracks in reality itself, appeared in the air before him. Through the cracks, he saw not the other side of the arena, but glimpses of a burning hellscape, the fiery realm of Muspelheim. A wave of suffocating heat and the stench of brimstone washed over him. The obsidian floor beneath the fissure didn't break. It petrified, turning a milky, crystalline white, the very laws of its material nature rewritten by the chaotic energy he had unleashed. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with horror. He hadn't just punched. He had torn a hole in the universe. The fissure began to widen, the sounds of distant, guttural roars leaking through. Suddenly, a shadow fell over him. A heavy hand clad in a leather and silver gauntlet clamped down on his shoulder. That, a deep, rumbling voice said from behind him, is enough. Izuku spun around to find Thor standing there, Mjolnir in his hand. The hammer was glowing with a soft blue light, and with a lazy flick of his wrist, Thor sent a bolt of clean, controlled lightning at the fissure. The lightning struck the cracks and sealed them, the divine energy stitching reality back together with a sound like humming glass. The petrified ground remained, a stark white scar on the black floor. Thor looked from the scar to Izuku, his expression unreadable. The cold disappointment from the throne room was gone, replaced by something a warrior recognized in another, the frustration of an untamed weapon. I was trying to control it. Izuku stammered, his bravado gone, replaced by the familiar shame of failure. You were trying to punch with it. Thor corrected, his voice a low rumble. You tried to treat a river as a stone. The Odin force is not a tool to be wielded, boy. It is a current to be guided. It is the lifeblood of Yggdrasil. It flows through all things. To command it, you must first learn to flow with it. He gestured to Izuku's fist. You filled your hand with the power of a star and expected it to behave like a firecracker. You are lucky you did not unmake this entire wing of the citadel. Izuku looked down at his hands, a fresh wave of despair washing over him. I don't know how. I spent my whole life learning to channel one for all. It's about impact. Force. This is something else entirely. Indeed, Thor said. He walked to the center of the arena and placed Mjolnir on the ground. One for all, from what my father's memories and you must have shown, is a legacy of mortals. A noble one, but finite. It is a sword, sharpened over generations. The Odin force is the cosmos itself. You cannot swing the cosmos. You must ask it to move. He looked at Izuku, his blue eyes intense. For the first time, Izuku saw not a grieving son or a disappointed god, but a mentor. Forget your smash, Thor commanded. Forget impact. I want you to feel the air around you. Feel the stone beneath your feet. Feel the light of the distant nebulae on your skin. They are all extensions of the power within you. Reach out with your senses, not your fist. Find a single mote of dust floating in the air before you, and simply ask it to fall. It sounded like mystical nonsense. But Izuku was desperate. He closed his eyes again, pushing aside his panic and focusing as Thor instructed. He ignored the roaring ocean of the Odin force, and tried to feel the smaller currents. He felt the subtle vibrations of the citadel, the faint heat from the glowing runes on the walls. He extended his senses, and after a long moment, he found it. A single speck of dust, dancing in a sliver of light. He didn't try to force it. He didn't try to push it. He just focused his will on it. He pictured it growing heavy, its dance slowing. Fall. He felt a tiny, infinitesimal shift in the energy around the dust mote. It wavered, then slowly, gently, drifted to the obsidian floor. Izuku's eyes snapped open. He had done it. It was a ridiculously small thing, but it was control. A real, tangible moment of control. A tiny smile touched his lips. Thor nodded, a ghost of a smile on his own face. Good. That is the first step. You have a warrior's spirit, Izuku Midoriya. You do not cower from a challenge. My father, he did not choose a coward, Perhaps he did not make a mistake after all. He clapped a hand on Izuku's shoulder, the weight of it nearly sending him to his knees. Now do it again. With a rock, their training sessions became a new routine. For hours each day, Thor would guide him, teaching him the philosophies of cosmic power. It was less about fighting and more about meditation. Izuku learned to feel the life energy of a plant, to sense the subtle shifts in Asgard's weather patterns, to listen to the song of the stars. His control grew, slowly, painstakingly. He was still a toddler learning to walk in a world of giants. But he was no longer stumbling in the dark. It was during a break in this training that a royal herald, clad in the silver and gold livery of the court, approached them with a bow. "My king," the herald said, his voice stiff and formal, his eyes carefully avoiding Izuku's face. "The council has been convened. They await your presence in the chamber of elders." The words sent a chill down Izuku's spine. The council. The old guard. His time of hiding was over. The chamber of elders was a stark contrast to the opulence of the throne room. It was a circular chamber paneled in ancient, dark wood that felt older than the mountains. The air was heavy with the weight of history and unspoken power. A single, massive round table, carved from the heart of a petrified Yggdrasil sapling, dominated the room. Seated around it were the half-dozen beings who had been Odin's most trusted advisors. At their head was a man so old his beard was braided down to his waist, his face a road map of 1,000 campaigns. One of his arms was made of pure, gleaming silver. This was General Var, Lord Commander of the Einherjar, the fiercest warrior in Asgard next to Thor himself. Beside him sat a woman named Elara, her face ageless and serene, her eyes holding a shrewd, calculating intelligence that missed nothing. She had been Odin's spy master and political advisor for 2 millennia. The others were powerful lords and ladies from the oldest houses of Asgard, their expressions ranging from stern neutrality to outright hostility. Izuku entered the room, feeling like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. He took the only empty seat, a high-backed chair at the head of the table, clearly meant for the king. It felt wrong. General Var wasted no time on pleasantries. His voice was gravel, worn down by centuries of shouting orders on the battlefield. "King Midoriya," he began, the title sounding like a poorly fitted piece of armor on Izuku. "It has been 2 weeks since the Allfather's passing. The 9 realms are aware of the transition. They have seen the light of the Odin force pass to an unexpected successor. They are watching. They are testing our borders. The frost giants of Jotunheim have raided a border outpost. The dark elves of Svartalfheim have begun to move in the shadows. The realms sense a vacuum. They sense weakness. Asgard is not weak." Thor's voice boomed from where he stood, leaning against the chamber wall. "Asgard's strength has not yet been demonstrated by its new king." Elara countered smoothly, her gaze fixed on Izuku. "A new ruler must make their mark. They must send a message to the other realms, a proclamation of strength and authority, so that none dare to challenge the throne." Lord Skeld, a proud noble with a sneer permanently etched onto his face, chimed in. "Odin would have already struck back at the Jotuns with thunder and fire. He would have hung their chieftain's head from the gates of our city as a warning. That is how peace is maintained. Through strength." They all looked at him, their collective expectation a crushing weight. They wanted him to be Odin. They wanted a show of force, a declaration of war, a brutal display of his newfound power to cow their enemies into submission. Izuku's hands clenched into fists under the table. This was everything his hero's soul railed against. He hadn't fought to save people only to become a tyrant who ruled through fear. "No," he said, his voice quiet but firm. The council stared at him. General Var's one good eye narrowed. "What did you say, boy?" "I said no," Izuku repeated, finding a sliver of courage. He sat up straighter, channeling the quiet resolve he used when facing down villains. "I will not start my reign with an act of aggression. Violence should always be the last resort, not the first. A warning shot is still a shot. It invites retaliation. It starts a cycle that never ends. It is a cycle that has kept Asgard safe for 500,000 years." Lord Skeld spat, slamming his fist on the ancient table. "And what was the cost of that safety?" Izuku countered, his voice gaining strength. "How many wars? How many lives lost on both sides? There has to be a better way. A king's first duty should be to protect his people, not to send them to die to prove a point. Protecting them is precisely what we are suggesting, Var growled. An ounce of blood spilled now saves a river of it later. I don't believe that, Izuku said simply. And I won't do it. A tense, furious silence fell over the chamber. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from disbelief to pure contempt. He was a child, a naive, soft-hearted fool from a primitive world who understood nothing of cosmic politics. Elara was the one to break the silence, her voice dangerously calm. Then what, pray tell, do you propose to do, Lord King? Will you simply sit in your chambers while our enemies gnaw at our borders? Izuku didn't have an answer. He knew what he wouldn't do, but he had no idea what he should do. His refusal felt hollow, an empty protest without a plan. The weight of their disapproval was suffocating. He had failed his first test as king. Later that day, Izuku bypassed the council entirely. He couldn't give them the show of force they demanded, but he couldn't do nothing either. He had to do something. He had to be a hero, and a hero, first and foremost, served the people. He walked out of the citadel, clad in his simple green tunic, and descended into the city of Asgard proper for the first time. The citizens stared, whispered, and bowed awkwardly as he passed. He ignored the ornate halls of the nobles and the bustling barracks of the warriors, and made his way to the lower market square, the heart of the city where the common folk, the farmers, the merchants, the artisans, gathered. He stood on the steps of a public fountain and, taking a deep breath, he spoke. His voice, naturally amplified by a whisper of the Odin force, carried across the entire square. My name is Izuku Midoriya, he began, his voice trembling slightly. I am your new king. I know I am not who you expected. I am not Odin. I cannot be. But I am here to listen. I will not make a grand proclamation of strength. I will not declare war on our enemies. My first decree is to hold an open forum. If you have a problem, a grievance, a dispute, bring it to me. I will hear you. Stunned silence greeted his announcement. This was unprecedented. The Allfather was a distant, powerful figure, a god on a throne who dealt with cosmic threats, not the price of grain or a leaky roof. A crowd began to gather, drawn by curiosity and disbelief. The council, watching through a scrying pool from their chamber, looked on with fury and embarrassment. This was no way for a king to act. He was debasing the crown, turning the throne of Odin into a glorified magistrate's bench. For a long time, no one approached. Then, a grizzled, stout man with dirt under his fingernails and shoulders slumped with weariness, hesitantly stepped forward. Your Majesty? He said, his voice rough. I am Brinjar, a farmer. My irrigation channels, which draw water from the Alivigar River, have run dry. The water is being blocked upstream. My crops are withering. General Var, watching remotely, scoffed. A simple matter. Send a squad of Einherjar. Whatever is blocking the river, kill it. But Izuku leaned forward, his expression earnest. What is blocking it? Brinjar shuffled his feet. A Rondrazzle, my lord. A beast of living rock and magma. It has made a den in the riverbed. We are afraid to approach it. A juvenile one, most likely. Thor murmured from the edge of the crowd, where he was observing. Lost from the southern volcanic plains, Izuku's analytical mind, the one that broke down quirks and battle strategies in seconds, immediately kicked in. Why would it make its den in a river? It's a creature of fire and rock. Water would be anathema to it. He turned back to Brinjar. Has this happened before? No, my king. Never. Have the southern plains been unusually dry this season? The farmer blinked, surprised by the question. Why, yes. The summer has been the hottest in a century, so it's not being malicious. Izuku concluded, a spark of understanding in his eyes. It's not blocking the river to be a nuisance. It's a creature of magma. It's in the riverbed because the mud and cool water are the only things keeping it from overheating in the drought. It's not attacking you. It's trying to survive. He turned to a nearby Einherjar captain who was watching the proceedings with a baffled expression. Captain, I don't need a squad to kill it. I need a detachment of engineers. We will dig a new, deeper channel from the river that leads to a nearby quarry. We'll divert enough water to create a deep, cool mud pit for the Rondrazzle. The creature gets a new home where it can survive the heat, and Brinjar's farm gets its water back. No one has to get hurt." The captain stared, then slowly nodded, a look of dawning respect on his face. The crowd murmured their approval. It was a simple, elegant solution that no one else had even considered. This broke the dam. One by one, others came forward. 2 merchants were locked in a bitter dispute over a trade route. Izuku listened patiently to both sides, then, using his quick mind, sketched out a new, more efficient route in the dirt that allowed them both to increase their profits by creating a shared distribution point. A weaver complained that the light elf silk she imported was too expensive. Izuku made a note, promising to use his new station to personally renegotiate the trade agreement with Alfheim, focusing on mutual benefit rather than Asgardian dominance. Finally, an elderly woman, her face a mask of grief, approached. She didn't have a problem to be solved. "My king," she whispered, her voice frail. "My son, Torvin, he fell in the Allfather's final battle, beyond the Sea of Stars. The Valkyries did not take him. I only wished to know, did he die with honor?" Izuku's heart ached for her. He had no way of knowing. But then, a flicker of memory, an echo from Odin's vast consciousness surfaced. A brief, fleeting image of a young, brave warrior with the woman's eyes standing his ground against a creature of pure darkness, buying time for his comrades to retreat. Izuku knelt down, taking the old woman's frail hands in his own. He channeled a tiny, gentle spark of the Odin force into his words, imbuing them with the resonant truth of what he was seeing. "He did not just die with honor, madam," he said softly, his voice full of a conviction that was not entirely his own. "He died a hero. He saved 3 of his shield brothers. His name is sung with gratitude in the halls of Valhalla, not as a warrior taken by the Valkyries, but as one whose sacrifice allowed others to fight another day. The Allfather himself witnessed his bravery." Tears streamed down the old woman's face, but for the first time in weeks she smiled. She bowed deeply, a gesture of profound gratitude that humbled Izuku to his core. He stayed in the square for hours, until the alien sun began to set, listening to every problem, no matter how small. He didn't have a solution for everything, but he listened. For the first time, the people of Asgard saw not a king, but a servant. A protector. It was a strange and unsettling concept for them, but for many, it was a welcome one. He earned no glory that day, no fear or awe. But he earned something far more valuable, whispers of respect. That night, exhausted but with a fragile sense of purpose, Izuku felt the familiar, terrifying pull of the throne. He had been avoiding it, avoiding the crushing cosmic awareness it brought. But now, he had a different reason to go. He wasn't seeking to rule the universe. He was a lonely, homesick boy, desperate for a glimpse of home. He entered the vast, empty throne room, the starlight from the ceiling casting long shadows. He walked up the dais and hesitantly sat upon Hlidskjaf. He braced himself for the onslaught of the 9 realms, but this time, he tried to focus his will, to guide the current as Thor had taught him. He didn't open himself to everything. He directed the throne's sight, its immense power, towards a single, specific destination: Midgard. Earth. Japan. Musudafu. The universe melted away and reformed. He was looking down, an omniscient, spectral observer, into the common room of the Class 1A dormitory building. It was quiet, the usual boisterous energy replaced by a heavy, somber mood. He saw them. Uraraka was curled up on a sofa, trying to read a book, but her eyes were unfocused, her expression clouded with worry. Ida was attempting to organize a study session, his movements stiff and overly formal, a poor mask for his own distress. Kirishima was punching a training bag in the corner, each impact a frustrated grunt. Then he saw Bakugo. He was standing by the window, staring out into the night sky, his back to the room. He was uncharacteristically still and silent. His fists were clenched at his sides, his shoulders tense. Izuku didn't need to be a god to feel the waves of rage, frustration, and a deep, gnawing guilt radiating from him. I was too slow. I was right there. I should have grabbed him. Finally, he saw All Might. He was sitting at a table with Aizawa, a holographic map of the battle site between them. Toshinori Yagi looked 10 years older than he had just 2 weeks ago. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollowed out with exhaustion and fear for his successor. He was coordinating with international hero agencies, with scientists from Ireland, trying to make sense of the impossible energy signature that had stolen his boy. He looked defeated. Broken. The sight was a physical blow. The small victory he had felt in the market square evaporated, replaced by an ocean of guilt so vast it threatened to drown him. He was here, solving farming disputes and trade routes, playing at being a king, while his friends, his mentor, the people he had sworn his life to protect, were suffering. He had abandoned them. Tears welled in his eyes, hot and silent. He was looking at a world he was no longer a part of, a life that was no longer his. He was the king of Asgard, the Allfather, wielder of cosmic power, but in that moment, sitting on a golden throne at the center of the universe, Izuku Midoriya had never felt more powerless, or more alone. Power abhors a vacuum, and the throne of Asgard was the greatest seat of power in the known cosmos. Odin's death was not a quiet passing, it was a cosmic event, a star winking out of existence. The shockwave of its absence rippled through the branches of Yggdrasil, a tremor felt in the heart of every realm. And in its wake, the whispers began. In Alfheim, the realm of the Light Elves, the whispers were like the rustling of silver leaves in an ancient forest. From their crystalline cities that hummed with serene magic, they had watched the Bifrost open over Midgard and seen the Odin force, a torrent of golden light, pass into a mortal vessel. They were a people of immense foresight and patience. They did not panic. But a deep, collective unease settled over their realm. Odin had been a constant, a mountain on their horizon for millennia. He was predictable, his strength a known quantity. This new king, this boy from a world of fleeting lifespans and chaotic energies they called quirks, was a variable they could not calculate. He was an anomaly, and anomalies bred instability. In the subterranean, star-forged heart of Nidavellir, the whispers were the harsh, grating sound of metal on whetstone. The dwarves were pragmatists, master craftsmen, and merchants above all else. Their relationship with Odin had been one of mutual benefit, built on treaties as strong as the Yaryu they mined. They built Asgard's finest weapons, and in return, Asgard's might protected their trade routes and guaranteed their neutrality. Now, their greatest client and protector was dead, replaced by an unknown quantity. Production quotas were in question. Trade agreements were now little more than aging parchment. The whispers in Nidavellir were of profit and loss, of assets and liabilities. They needed to know if the new management was reliable, or if it was time to renegotiate the terms of their contract with a show of their own formidable, industrial might. And in Muspelheim, the whispers were the roar of a billion infernos. In the realm of fire and eternal war, the news was not met with caution or concern, but with a savage, burning glee. Surtur's legions, the fire giants who dreamt of the final, glorious blaze of Ragnarok, saw Odin's death as the cracking of a divine dam. For ages, Odin's power had held them in check, his watchful eye a constant deterrent. But a boy? A mortal Midgardian whelp on the throne? To them, this was not a succession. It was a power vacuum begging to be filled with fire and ash. The whispers there were of conquest, of weakness, of opportunity. It was time, they hissed to one another in their language of crackling flame, to test the strength of this new, so-called king. Izuku knew none of the specifics, but he felt the pressure. It was a subtle shift in the cosmic hum of the Odin force, a discordant note in the symphony of the Nine Realms. The fragile peace he had found in his training with Thor and his small victory in the city square was beginning to erode under the weight of 1,000 worlds' scrutiny. The summons came on a day like any other. He was in the training grounds with Thor, learning to weave a small, stable shield of pure energy, when the royal herald arrived, his face pale and grim. "My king!" the herald announced, his voice tight with formality. "The emissaries have arrived. From Alfheim, Nidavellir, and Muspelheim. They await you in the Great Hall. They have come to pay their respects, and to take the measure of Asgard's new master." The Great Hall was a place designed to inspire awe and intimidation in equal measure. Its vaulted ceiling was so high that actual clouds, seeded with starlight, drifted languidly beneath it. Banners depicting the great battles and triumphs of Asgard's history hung between colossal golden pillars. Long, Empty feasting tables stretched into the distance, capable of seating thousands of Einherjar. And at the far end, raised on a dais of sunstone, was Odin's throne, Hlidskjalf, looking more imposing and empty than ever. Izuku felt ridiculously small as he walked the long aisle toward it. He was dressed not in his comfortable tunic, but in formal Asgardian attire, a high-collared coat of dark green, almost black, embroidered with the golden, knot-like patterns of the royal house. It was heavy, restrictive, and felt like a costume for a play he hadn't rehearsed. Thor walked a half-step behind him to his right, a silent, powerful pillar of support. And to his left, moving with a liquid grace that was almost unnerving, was Loki. "Try not to look like a terrified rabbit, Your Majesty," Loki murmured, his voice a silken thread in Izuku's ear. "They can smell fear from a realm away. Remember, you are the one with the ultimate power here. They are merely guests in your house." "They're not guests," Izuku whispered back, his palms sweating. "They're judges. And I'm the defendant." "Semantics," Loki purred with a dismissive wave of his hand. Izuku ascended the dais, and took his seat on the throne. It no longer assaulted his senses with the full force of the cosmos. His training had granted him a thin, fragile wall of control, but he could still feel the faint hum of a trillion lives at the edge of his perception. He gripped the golden armrests, his knuckles white, and forced himself to look at the three delegations assembled at the foot of the dais. The first to step forward represented the light elves of Alfheim. She was a woman of impossible, ethereal beauty named Lyra, her silver hair woven with living flowers that bloomed and faded with each breath. She moved with a dancer's grace, her iridescent robes shimmering like captured moonlight. She bowed, a gesture of perfect, practiced elegance. "King Izuku of Asgard," she said, her voice like the chiming of crystal bells. "Alfheim offers its deepest condolences on the passing of the great Allfather Odin. For 10,000 years, he was a mountain, a steadfast and immovable presence in the 9 realms. A comfort, even to those who did not always agree with his methods." Her eyes, the color of twilight, met his. "We have come to offer our continued alliance, and to see what has grown in the mountain's shadow. We wonder, has a mighty oak taken root, or merely a sapling that might be swept away by the coming winds?" The words were poetic, respectful, but the meaning was as sharp as a shard of glass. "Are you strong enough? Or are you a temporary inconvenience?" Loki leaned in again. "She is asking if you are a fool," he whispered, a hint of amusement in his voice. Before Izuku could formulate a reply that wasn't a nervous stammer, the second emissary pushed forward. He was the antithesis of the light elf. This was Brock, emissary of the dwarves of Nidavellir. He was short, immensely broad, with a magnificent, braided beard so long it was tucked into his belt. His armor was not polished and decorative, but thick, functional, and still covered in a fine layer of soot from the forge. He did not bow, he gave a curt, impatient nod. "King of Asgard," he grunted, his voice the sound of rocks grinding together. "No time for pretty words. Odin's death voids all standing contracts. We have 3 shipments of refined ore ready for delivery, pending confirmation of payment. The Einherjar's last order for 100,000 standard-issue spears is halfway complete, but my smiths don't work on credit. Furthermore, the treaty protecting our trade routes through the Norn Straits is up for renewal. Odin's signature guaranteed safe passage. Does yours carry the same weight?" He was all business, his gaze sharp and appraising. He wasn't looking at a king, he was looking at a business partner, and he was deeply skeptical of the new CEO. He represented the logistical nightmare of running an interstellar empire, a side of heroism Izuku had never once considered. "He is asking if you will pay your bills on time," Loki supplied helpfully. And then, the third emissary strode forward, and the temperature in the great hall rose by a palpable 20 degrees. He was a fire giant from Muspelheim, and he was colossal. At least 15 feet tall, his skin was a mosaic of cooling magma and obsidian, with veins of molten fire pulsing beneath the surface. He wore crude plates of black iron that seemed to have been melted directly onto his body. In his hand, he carried an immense great sword of volcanic glass that radiated a shimmering heat haze. Every step he took left a faintly glowing, scorched footprint on the sunstone floor. This was Ignis, a chieftain in Surtur's army. He did not bow. He did not nod. He stopped 20 feet from the throne, planted his great sword before him, and laughed. It was a horrible sound, like an avalanche mixed with a forest fire. "So this is it!" the giant boomed, his voice a roar that echoed through the hall. "This is Odin's heir! A little, soft-skinned Midgardian whelp! I've seen bigger baubles on a dwarf's beard. Surtur sends his regards, boy. He wonders if you cried when the old one-eyed king croaked." The Asgardian guards lining the hall bristled, their hands tightening on their spears. Thor's expression darkened, and a low rumble of thunder could be heard from outside the citadel. Loki, however, looked positively delighted. "And this one," he whispered to Izuku, his voice practically giddy, "simply wants to know if you will burn." Ignis took another step forward, pointing a massive, smoking finger at Izuku. "Odin was a warrior. He earned his throne with blood and strength. What have you done to earn it, eh? Fell out of the sky. We do not recognize your rule. Muspelheim does not bow to children. Prove to me you are worthy of that chair, or I will melt it down and forge a new chamber pot for my master." The insult was blatant, a direct challenge to his authority, to Odin's legacy, to all of Asgard. The lords and ladies of the court, who had been watching from the galleries, gasped. This was an intolerable affront. They looked to their new king, their expressions a mixture of outrage and expectation. They expected a show of overwhelming, divine power. They expected him to rise from the throne and blast this insolent creature to ashes. Izuku's heart was hammering against his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to de-escalate, to find a peaceful solution. But he looked at the smug, arrogant face of the fire giant, at the cautious, probing eyes of the elf, at the stern, demanding stare of the dwarf. He looked at the expectant faces of the Asgardian court. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that weakness here, now, would be an invitation. Not just for insults, but for war. If he backed down, every ambitious warlord from every dark corner of the Nine Realms would see Asgard as a prize ripe for the taking. He needed to show strength. But what was his strength? He couldn't unleash a chaotic Odin smash. That would be a disaster. He had to do something else. He remembered Loki's words, his constant, manipulative, yet occasionally insightful whispers. He remembered the look on Thor's face when he had spoken of his father's legacy. He had to be a king, but he had to be a hero, too. He took a deep breath, the air searing from Ignis's proximity, and stood up from the throne. He was dwarfed by the giant, a fact that was not lost on anyone in the hall. "You speak of proof and worthiness, Chieftain Ignis," Izuku said, his voice quiet but steady, carried through the hall by the power humming within him. "You are right to ask for it. A crown means nothing without the strength to defend it." Ignis let out another booming laugh. "The little man has a big voice. So, what will it be, boy? Will you hide behind your thundering bodyguard?" He gestured contemptuously at Thor. "Or will you face me yourself?" "I will face you," Izuku said, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. A wave of murmurs swept through the court. This was it. The moment of truth. Ignis's fiery grin widened. "Excellent! I challenge you to the home gang. Trial by combat, to the death or to submission. If you win, Muspelheim will consider acknowledging your reign. If I win," he let out a low chuckle, "I will take your head back to my master as a paperweight." This was his chance. A one-on-one duel. Not a war. He could contain this, limit the damage. It was the hero's way, face the threat directly, and protect everyone else from the fallout. Loki leaned in one last time, his voice a low, urgent hiss. "A word of advice, Your Majesty. Power is not always about the size of the explosion. Sometimes, the most disarming weapon, the one your enemy can never prepare for, is an unexpected kindness." The advice was so contrary to Loki's nature that it caught Izuku completely off guard. "I accept your challenge," Izuku declared, his voice ringing with a conviction he didn't feel. The royal training grounds, the same obsidian coliseum where Izuku had first torn a hole in reality, were now packed with onlookers. Asgardian nobles filled the stands, their faces alight with bloodthirsty anticipation. The emissaries from Alfheim and Nidavellir stood apart, their expressions carefully neutral, their judgment reserved. Thor stood near the entrance, his arms crossed, a storm of worry and pride in his eyes. Ignis stood in the center of the arena, his massive obsidian sword wreathed in flame, the heat from his body making the air around him shimmer. He was a creature of pure, elemental destruction. Izuku walked out to face him. He had shed the heavy, formal coat, wearing only a simple, dark green tunic and his light Asgardian armor on his forearms and shins. He was unarmed. He didn't even have Gungnir. The spear was a symbol of kingship, a weapon of ultimate destruction. Bringing it to this fight felt wrong. It wasn't a tool for settling a bully's challenge. "No weapon, boy!" Ignis roared with amusement. "Have you come to be cooked, or will you fight?" "I'll fight," Izuku said, settling into a familiar stance, one that was low to the ground, ready to spring. He closed his eyes for a second, feeling for the two powers within him, the infinite, calm ocean of the Odin force, and the crackling, kinetic fire of One for All. He couldn't use the former as a weapon, not with any control. But the latter was his. He let the green lightning of full cowling flicker to life around his body, settling it at a comfortable, sustainable 20%. The Asgardian crowd gasped. This was the other power the healers had spoken of, the strange energy of Midgard. It was nothing like the divine magic they were used to. It was wilder, more kinetic. Ignis's grin faded, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "A parlor trick?" He didn't wait for an answer. With a battle cry that shook the arena, he charged. It was a surprisingly fast movement for a being his size, each step cracking the obsidian floor. He raised his flaming greatsword high, and brought it down in a devastating vertical chop meant to cleave Izuku in two. To the onlookers, Izuku simply vanished. One moment he was there, the next he was a green blur, easily sidestepping the massive attack. The flaming sword slammed into the ground, sending a shower of molten rock and obsidian shards into the air. Izuku didn't counterattack. He moved, a fluid dance of analysis and evasion. He used float to leap high into the air, avoiding a sweeping horizontal strike that would have leveled a small building. He used Fa Gene, storing the kinetic energy from his landings, to burst from side to side, a phantom that Ignis couldn't hope to track. He wasn't just dodging. He was observing. He's powerful, but he's slow. His right side is dominant. Every major swing starts with a telltale shift of his weight to that foot. The sword is heavy. After a 3-swing combo, his follow-through leaves him off balance for exactly 1.2 seconds. The joints in his iron armor, particularly at the wrist and elbow, are weaker, designed for mobility. His mind was a supercomputer, processing data, formulating a strategy. He wasn't fighting like a god. He was fighting like Deku. "Stand still and fight me, you little gnat!" Ignis roared in frustration, his wild swings growing more desperate and predictable. Izuku saw his opening. Ignis lunged with a clumsy, powerful thrust. Izuku ducked under the blade, the heat of it singing the hair on his head. He was now inside the giant's guard. Instead of striking the giant's body, he shot his arm upwards. Black whip! Dark, ethereal tendrils erupted from his arm, not to smash or crush, but to wrap around Ignis's massive wrist. The sudden, unnatural constriction surprised the fire giant, his forward momentum momentarily checked. It was the opening Izuku needed. In that split second of surprise, he let the stored energy of Fa Gene explode from the soles of his feet, launching himself upwards. He drew back his right hand, not for a punch, but with his fingers open, aimed at the giant's hand. Delaware smash! Air force! He flicked his fingers, releasing a tight, focused bullet of compressed air, a 20% version, more of a sharp jab than a cannon blast. It wasn't aimed to wound. It was aimed with pinpoint precision at the giant's knuckles, right where they were clenched around the hilt of his sword. The impact was sharp and jarring. The giant's grip, already compromised by Black Whip, broke. The massive, flaming greatsword was knocked from his hand. It flew through the air, end over end, and slammed into one of the colossal pillars supporting the upper gallery of the Colosseum. There was a sickening crunch of stone. The obsidian sword, imbued with the primordial heat of Muspelheim, had shattered the pillar's base. Cracks spiderwebbed up its length. With a groan of protesting rock, the massive pillar began to topple, directly towards the spot where the stunned and unarmed Ignis was standing. The crowd gasped. Several of the Asgardian nobles smirked. A fitting, dramatic end for the challenger. It was justice. He had brought ruin upon himself. Let him be crushed. Ignis looked up, his fiery eyes wide with genuine shock and a flicker of fear as tons of carved stone and debris began its fatal descent. He was a being of fire and might, but he was not fast enough to escape this. But Izuku wasn't watching the pillar. He was watching Ignis. He saw not an arrogant challenger, but a person in mortal danger. And in that instant, he ceased to be a king defending his honor. He became a hero. He acted on pure, unthinking instinct. He launched himself towards the falling pillar, his green lightning flaring. He landed between the collapsing stone and the stunned fire giant, his back to his opponent. He thrust both of his hands towards the sky. The Asgardian court expected him to try and catch it, a feat of brute strength. They expected him to shatter his bones in a futile, foolish gesture. They were wrong. Izuku didn't use one for all. He closed his eyes and reached for the ocean. He didn't try to command it or shape it into a weapon. He asked it, "Protect." A brilliant, golden light erupted from his outstretched hands. It was not a chaotic blast, but a smooth, perfect, translucent dome of pure energy. It formed above him in an instant, a shield of solidified starlight. The pillar slammed into the golden shield. There was no thunderous crash. There was only a deep, resonant hum as the shield absorbed the kinetic energy of thousands of tons of falling rock. The pillar crumbled against the barrier, its fragments sliding harmlessly off the sides. The crowd was utterly silent. They had just witnessed a boy catch a collapsing tower not with muscle, but with a simple, elegant act of will. But he wasn't done. The rubble was still a hazard. With the golden shield still holding, he planted his feet, the green lightning of One for All surging around him again. One for All. 45%. St. Louis. Smash. He wasn't punching. He was pushing. He spun, a full-body roundhouse kick that connected not with an enemy, but with the base of his own golden shield. The kinetic force of One for All was transferred into the divine energy of the Odin force. The shield pulsed, and with a great, whooshing boom, it blasted all the rubble and debris outwards, sending it flying into the empty center of the arena where it crashed harmlessly. Izuku landed softly, breathing heavily, the dual energies receding back into him. The arena was silent. He slowly turned to face the fire giant, who was staring, utterly dumbfounded, at the spot where he would have been crushed into paste. Izuku walked towards his defeated opponent. The giant flinched, expecting a final, humiliating blow. Instead, Izuku stopped before him, looked up at the towering creature, and extended his hand. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice completely devoid of malice, filled only with genuine concern. Ignis stared at the small, offered hand. He looked at the boy who had outmaneuvered him, disarmed him, and then, without a moment's hesitation, saved his life from a death of his own making. He saw no triumph in the boy's eyes. No arrogance. Only sincerity. This was a form of power he could not comprehend. It was a strength not of destruction, but of preservation. Slowly, hesitantly, the great fire giant reached down and took the boy's hand in his own massive, rocky one. He allowed Izuku to help him to his feet. Then, to the utter, slack-jawed shock of every single being present, Ignis, chieftain of Muspelheim, knelt. He bowed his massive, fiery head before the mortal boy from Midgard. "I submit," the giant rumbled, his voice stripped of its arrogance, now filled with a grudging, baffled respect. "You are worthy." From the stands, Lyra, the light elf, allowed a small, intrigued smile to touch her lips. This was not the brute strength of Odin, but it was a different kind of power altogether. A compelling one. Brock, the dwarf, let out a short, sharp grunt. He crossed his thick arms, a gesture of grudging approval. The boy was efficient. He solved the problem with minimal collateral damage and had even preserved a valuable, if loud, asset. Loki was the only one who laughed, a soft, genuine chuckle of pure, unadulterated delight. The boy had actually listened to him. He was learning. This was going to be magnificent. Izuku looked at the kneeling giant, at the shocked faces in the crowd, at the proud, approving nod from Thor. He looked at his own hand, still tingling with the echoes of two immense and disparate powers, finally working in harmony. He hadn't won by being a king, or a god, or even a warrior. He had won by being a hero, and for the first time since he had arrived in this impossible, terrifying, golden world, Izuku Midoriya began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to wear this crown after all, not as the new Odin, but as himself.